Oh,
Hello,
wait,
hello,
a little
everyone.
squeak.
I'll give
Oh,
everyone a moment to
Natalie, you're
connect
supposed
the
to be
sound.
working.
Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's
Hi.
1283rd New Social Environment. I'm Joshua, a Programs Associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Jane Lombard and Eriola Pira. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Jane Lombard co-founded her first gallery in 1995 on Broome Street with the debut exhibition Nice and Fatal by Pina and Via Lewandowsky. Over the years, her former gallery relocated several times from 26th Street to West 19th Street. In 2015, Lombard opened her eponymous gallery, whose home is currently located on White Street in Tribeca. From the beginning, Jane Lombard has been committed to showcasing international voices, presenting multiple artists' debut exhibitions in New York and even in the US, helping introduce diverse global perspectives to the contemporary art scene. Our host today is Eriola Pira, who's a researcher and curator. She's the curator and director of programs at the Vierles Center for Art and Politics at the New School. In this capacity, she works closely with artists to explore, commission, and present new ideas and work on art and its politics, including exhibitions, performances, and publications. She's held previous positions at Art in General, NARS Foundation, and the Foundation for Culture and Society, as well as contributed to and collaborated with institutions worldwide. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to Ariola.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Chloe, and thank you, Magli, and everyone at the Rail for this invitation and for all of your support in making today possible. And thank you, Jane. It's a real pleasure to be in conversation with you as we celebrate 30 years of your remarkable
Oh.
work as a dealer and a gallerist. As Joshua said, your first foray into art dealing was in 1995, and through the Jane Lombard Gallery since, you've built a program defined by intellectual curiosity, by global engagement with artists and a sustained commitment to those artists, and work that bridges aesthetic and political realms. From early shows that introduce international voices from Central and Eastern Europe to Middle East, China, and so on, you brought artists to New York City and to New York City audiences that we may not have otherwise known. To long-standing collaborations with artists like Michael Rakowitz, Lee Mengwei, and Dan Przofsky, the gallery's become known for fostering dialogue around pressing social and cultural questions. Over the past 3 decades, Jane, you've championed artists who take risks conceptually, materially, and politically, while also navigating the shifting landscapes of the art world. And Joshua mentioned moving around just in New York City, but also political changes and cultural changes with integrity and vision. Your support has extended beyond the gallery walls, investing in the structures and networks that allow artists and ideas to thrive and be celebrated. This morning, we'll take a look together at some of those key moments, the exhibitions, the encounters that have defined your approach, and the evolution of politically engaged art over these years, and what it means to sustain a gallery and a community of artists over time. Again, such a pleasure to be in conversation with you. I was trying to think about when I first heard about you. And I believe it must have been in the early 2000s when, as a sort of young curator, I was working with artists from Central and Eastern Europe in a residency program here in New
Oh.
York City. And artists would come from Central and Eastern Europe and they're like, do you know this dealer, Jane Lombard? And I was like, yeah, I do. But how do you know her? And of course, for me in New York City, like this was a gallery that I was well acquainted for. And it was always surprising that so many artists coming from elsewhere knew about it as well. And I think in some ways speaks to the ways in which the gallery has been international from day one. But I want to kind of go back a little bit earlier than I think your work as a dealer and gallerist. I kind of want to know, how did you come to art before
I told you, I have,
before you became a dealer and gallerist? What
I
were
said,
some of the formative experiences of seeing and engaging with art that led you to where you
I
are
said,
today?
yeah, I said the stork was an art student. I don't, I just like to draw, like art.
So you made
And
art.
I did, well, kind of, you know,
Mhm. Was there a
but
particular medium or genre?
no. It sort of all came about a little bit, probably a little bit later. And I was an art student, uh, not great places, you know, not outstanding. But one thing leads to another. And I ended up with a gallery.
And what were some of the things that one thing led to another in terms of, I think, seeing art, being surrounded by artists, sort of being in conversation with artists? I think that's such a key
Oh, that's
aspect of being a dealer, being in conversation with artists. And I think it's really great that you have this background of making and sort of practicing art yourself. So then I think being a dealer. So I'm curious
well,
if
this picture does say a lot. That's
Mhm.
Dan Perjovsky.
Yeah.
And it uh, in the 90s, it had to be in the 90s.
This is in 1995.
95, yeah.
That's the sort of the
And
captions.
I was involved on the board of a nonprofit that did programs in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe.
Mhm.
And when things were finally much better politically, we developed, the organization developed a program called ArtsLink.
Mhm.
And um, I think some of the people you met were probably
Probably.
familiar with ArtsLink.
Yeah.
And Dan was one of the first ArtsLink fellows that came over here. And he was at Franklin Furnace with Martha Wilson. And he was a huge success. So it was years later that we picked him up, as I was telling you, uh, through another Romanian, but we knew each other. So he came to New York and did a great show. Oh, eventually, he did a show at MoMA,
Mhm.
which was that we were very happy about. So that was sort of, I was traveling a lot to Eastern Europe and to the Soviet Union. And you start saying, well, you know, any artists? And you could meet them very quickly. They weren't allowed a lot of things that we are familiar with. It was quite different. But hear a lot of artists that have not been seen, and they have a lot to learn. But wow, why don't we show them?
Yeah.
It, and all through it filtered down. And oddly enough, our first show we opened with Via Lewandowsky, who was actually an East German.
Artist, yeah.
Yeah, and
And did you know at that time, or in what way were you aware that you were doing, and not just aware, but I think very intentional about it, that you were doing something different from other dealers at the time in taking a risk in many ways and an interest into artists of that particular region, or sort of very politically engaged artists like Dan, who again is a journalist, and his artistic practice really, I think, is very interesting. I think if we're to think about sort of the engagement of art and politics and the ways in which
that's what he
he
does.
does it, you know. So in what way was your sort of engagement with these artists also coming out of an awareness that these were not practices that were being seen or supported or sort of very visible in New York at the time?
I think I'm very, very determined to show different artists. They
Mhm.
had different stories to tell. They were different people. And in America, you're showing American art. And I
Mhm.
believe American art was at its peak at that time. So, of course, but there are other artists in the world, and maybe they should be brought in.
Mhm.
So we started to show them, and it was a lot of determination. And we were bringing artists over and trying to help them get a little more established.
Mhm.
And I think Dan was one of the more successful ones, and not maybe because of us, but maybe he met a lot of people.
Mhm.
and he spoke out.
Yeah, and would you say that Dan or other artists, or maybe even exhibitions in particular, sort of from the early days of you working sort of as a dealer, how might they have defined sort of the 30 years that followed? I'm curious about sort of whether there was a defining exhibition or a defining artist or a defining moment that looking back, you can kind of trace and make those connections between sort of where you started and where you are now.
I think, again, we've been discussing this. Li Mingwei,
Mm.
uh, this is not Li Mingwei. That is not either. That's Li Mingwei. He proposed to us that he do a project where he would cook dinner for one person and with a dining project. So we sort of arranged this, and we had a kitchen in the gallery, and we invited certain people to come and dine with Ming Wei. And our phones just kept ringing, and nobody else had done this,
Mm.
obviously. And it was a very happy moment, and we I don't know, it's been done again. He then went on to the letter writing project, which appeared at the Whitney one summer. Uh, what the well then he took a deep breath and proposed the sleeping project, and we said, okay, okay.
Tell us a little bit about this project in particular.
It was wonderful. It was so wonderful. We did get a lawyer, just to be sure we were doing the right thing.
What were some of the questions, I'm curious, that you had to sort of run through a lawyer about a show like this?
Well, can you get sued? I mean, it was, you know, with a stranger,
Hmm.
and we're proposing it, but it went really well, and people have written about it since, and I believe they did it in Venice at the Venice Biennale. But it was, and then he did the mending project, which has also been, but they call this relational aesthetics now.
Yes, no,
And
it's sort of an art historical way in which we understand it. And again, I think within a particular academic and sort of scholarly um, field, this is sort of well positioned. And I think the gallery's known for, I think, doing rigorous scholarly curatorial programming with a global view, as I think we've already begun to see. But I'm curious, how do you just sort of thinking about some of the legal and logistical come up with some of these projects? How do you balance as a dealer, I think, the demands of such serious artistic rigor with the need in many ways to keep the gallery viable in a commercial environment like New York City? And so I think
you
doing
you go
the work that you
carefully.
doesn't come without risk.
Oh, I was thinking that we had one situation where we weren't sure what was happening. Carlos Guerricoa, the Cuban artist that we showed sort of off and on, because he could never get a visa to come to this country in those days. And we were if he asked said be careful with something, we were. And but we had some, men in the trench coats come to visit us
Mm.
one day. And they didn't ask questions exactly. They checked on some things, but nothing ever happened because of it. And then Carlos just had too much trouble coming into this country.
Yeah. And did those experiences in any way shape or impact the ways in which you worked with him, but also with other artists? And I think this is also something that potentially a lot of galleries and a lot of arts institutions are currently facing in the political climate that we're in,
Oh,
where working with international artists has become costly, risky, politically sort of unsustainable, because of some of the same issues that you brought up. And so I'm curious sort of how you've navigated those shifts in the political climate over the years, just around working with international artists.
it's getting worse.
Mhm.
And I mean, Munir Fatmi, I think probably wouldn't come here now
Mhm.
because he gets hassled in immigration
Yeah.
and so badly that he doesn't know why. And he'll we'll get hold of projects he's done and show them that, yeah, it's you have to think about it.
Yeah.
Are we going to ship stuff over? Yes, sometimes you can do that. But as I said, now we really are thinking, we have another artist that is, for political reasons, has to be extremely careful.
Mhm.
And we hope that he can get a visa to come here
Yeah.
at some point. So yeah,
I think
it's a time to be trying to do this more and more.
precisely. I think there's a way in which I think your work as a dealer and supporter of these types of artistic practices that take such political risk in their, let's say, home country, but also I think the ways in which that it gets implicated and sort of complicates their showing their work in here in the US, I think is you've shown the way in many ways, and that um, becomes, I think, apparent to all of us working in this field that this is work that must go on.
Well, Margarita Cabrera is another artist who,
And maybe Joshua, we can, if we can get to, I think we have an image of Margarita's work.
oh, the cacti.
Yeah, I believe we,
Oh,
maybe not.
no, oh, there, those are the cacti. Those cacti are not cacti. They are made of border guards uniforms, the US-Mexico border. And she is working with people who have crossed the border. She actually, it's a very beautiful situation.
Yeah.
When she gives them the leaves of the cacti to embroider with whatever they want. They can say anything, they can put anything they want about their experiences. And then she puts the cacti together. But those women are given a percentage of the sale price of the cactus. So when you buy one, you are helping a woman who needs it.
Yeah.
And
Sort of engenders a sort of economy of support beyond sort of, I think, the art market and sort of the
yeah,
conditions circulating work in the global art.
yeah, excuse me, but there we go. Lost you. Yeah, she has to be somewhat careful. Okay, this is Munir. These are skateboards with prayer rugs on them.
Mm.
Munir felt that brings religion to everybody, and probably has many other reasons for doing it that way.
And these, for those of us, for those of you who may not have had a chance to visit the exhibition at Jane Lombard Gallery in Tribeca, this is an exhibition that's currently on view, titled 30 by 30, a selection of 30 artists over 30 years. And Jane, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the process of putting this show together?
Oh, long, very long, all summer. It was very difficult to know of all the artists which ones to show.
Mm.
And the apostrophe on the left is Via Lewandowsky, our first artist.
Very first artist you worked with.
Yes. and very different than the work that was in his first show, but one of the most popular works in the show. So I found that really very nice. He was here, he came, but he is still working and known in Europe. This is the writing is Dan Perjovsky.
Okay.
This is
Which, let me just read it in case people aren't able
it
to
says my gallery, my home, my gallery, my castle. But I'm not reading that right.
You're reading right.
The works are works that artists who are working today, who are active and known.
Mhm.
I'm trying to, it's hard to squeak, Cardinal. And
Joshua, maybe we can go see some of the other images from this show. I believe we have a few more.
this is our memorabilia. Oh, well, it's another artist that from way back, Zofia Kulik. We did not show her. Well, we had a couple pieces in the back, but she has also just come out with a book, which I've got to get a hold of. She was a Polish photographer, and she did these very unusual works. It was in the Venice Biennale, represented Poland, very political. Her father was in the army, and we have, this is with the Venice invitation. Oh, the Ortas, Lucy and Jorge. This is a passport, Antarctica passport.
I'm curious, looking back at this exhibition, and as you're reflecting on your work and the legacy, what are you noticing, or sort of what is becoming apparent that perhaps you didn't see earlier or while it was happening at the time?
People begin to, I think, to understand it, to know that there are other artists in the world, and that they reflect something of where they live, of what their situation is. I mean, sometimes it's a situation that we read about in the newspaper, but whoops, go back. You could go back. Whoop. No, the other way. I can't. Yeah, Suwang Wangzi. He is a Burmese artist from the Shan province. I learned all the provinces. His grandfather was the first democratically elected governor of the Shan province. He was murdered by the military. I mean, it's the same thing over and over again. I've learned a lot of history, but people are amazed to see sort of a contemporary interpretation of what's going on over there that we just read about in the newspapers.
I wonder, I think, looking at this sort of plus years of engaging with artists who have a deeply political, social justice, material, and sort of global engagement in their work, and there by default, your work. I'm curious if you also have seen any shifts in the understanding, both by artists, by the larger public, but also your own definition of political art. How has that changed or sort of evolved over 30 years through this work with these incredible artists who, again, are operating in political conditions that, as you say, we can read about in the newspapers, but don't always have sort of access or sort of a deep understanding. And I think you've also said that art sometimes speaks most directly. And so I think
artists speak. In their way, they speak very loudly. And I think that people are attracted to that. And I mean, especially now, I'm thinking of Amy Sherald, we don't show, but uh, she is so representative of our time. I mean, it's terrible. So, artists are the news. They're what's going on.
What's going on, but in some ways, how do they also reflect, I think, sort of a historical understanding of how things might be shifting or changing? Again, I think sort of the ways in which we understand political art maybe doesn't look like it did in the 90s today.
No, I think we are a little more in turmoil than we were. I mean,
sort of here in the US, but I think globally, that might have been the case all along.
well, yeah, maybe, yes. But generally speaking, the problems were in Europe. Now that shifted over here.
And how do you see artists reflecting on those changes? But also then how do you as a dealer, as someone who's in conversation and supporting these artists and these practices more broadly?
Well, Dan Brajovsky commented freely on this in his show last November. And he was very angry. And you take a deep breath, you say, okay, Dan, go for it. But shows come down, they don't stay forever. But that was a very strong statement at the end. He was very upset by our elections.
And the ways in which it also has reverberation globally, I think.
For everybody. I mean,
in that part of the world, and because I come from it,
yeah.
I've seen the ways in which I think a rise in sort of right-wing
yes.
discourse kind of really sort of, I think, reverberates in those local politics and local ways of even culture, I think, elsewhere. And so I think in that way, your deep travels and research throughout many years and sort of this global perspective of working across cultures, I think is very valuable. And I'm curious if there's a specific studio visit or travel moment, I think, that shifted your thinking about how you run the gallery or support artists who are making such political work. Was there a particular moment that you might pinpoint to sort of realizing that these are practices that need support in ways that I think maybe a lot of other dealers may not have always supported because it takes a whole lot of risk to work with someone like Dan or other artists?
Well, I think visiting Sewang, his name is Sewang Wangzi, and absolutely delightful person, but he's in exile, and you see what's happened. And that was, I visited him at the time the Civil War was going on over there, and the other things that had happened in the past, all about, well, now it's called Myanmar, not Burma, but the opium trade, all these things got into it. You suddenly see, whoa, there's a lot here to think about. And it's a part of the world we're not so familiar with.
And what does your process as a dealer look like in terms of the conversations that you're having with artists, the kind of research that you might be doing in order to, I think, know more about a particular sort of situation or that an artist is working in order to then bring that and sort of, I think, show it in New York City? What do those conversations with artists like? We'll get to this project in a minute, or if you want to dig into it.
Well, since it's sitting here, this is Enemy Kitchen. But okay, so you work with the enemy. This is, of course, Rakowitz, who, well, food is is the way to do it. And when his art students began complaining about the Iraqi war that we jumped into, he said, oh, no, wait, just a minute, none of this. And he brought them some food. He said, I'll bring lunch tomorrow. I said, gee, this is good. And it's Iraqi. So then he thought, well, maybe do more food. So were you here when he was doing Enemy Kitchen in New York? It was a very interesting project. It grew to this truck, which is manned by American veterans of the Iraq War. And they have white jackets, all they on them. It's very official. This was in Chicago, out in front of the museum. And Michael gets an Iraqi restaurant or Middle Eastern restaurant to do the food. The recipes are of his grandmother from, and sort of a little side thing. We were in Athens. Michael has a wonderful show in Athens. And on the pillars of the room installed are his grandmother's handwritten recipes. And they look like they're glued to the pillars in that room. And it's very, very effective. I wish everybody could see that show. It's beautiful.
Your collaboration with Michael has been ongoing. Wonder if you can share a little bit about what that looks like, what these sort of deep engagement with an artist practice like Michael's, who I think takes so many different forms, from sculpture to sort of video installation, sort of in a more traditional sort of gallery, to sort of really being out in the street, being out in public. Sort of what does it look like to collaborate and really support an artist who takes such bold risks, but does it in such beautiful, poetic ways across galleries, across sort of being in public spaces and having done sort of large scale public work to sort of things that also live very subtly in place and in space.
You take a deep breath. There's another picture here, which...
With Michael, I believe.
Yeah, with Michael. It should be right next to this. No, that's not Michael. There. This is Donnie George. He was the director of the Baghdad Museum. And that's when we sort of began all of this. And
what year is this? There's not a year.
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
But Michael looks very young, so.
I'm sorry?
Michael looks very young here.
Yeah, I know he does. He fresh-faced young man. He was so thrilled to meet Donnie George. In fact, they became very good friends. And we, at that time, had, I'm looking, you can't see in my background, there's some figures, but you can't see them. Those are Michael's figures from the Invisible Enemy Should Not Exist. And it was based on the looting of Donnie George's museum and of many, many artifacts. And he's recreating all of them. And from the Baghdad Museum, based on the fact that the American forces promised to guard the museum, but they didn't. So all these things have been stolen. And Michael is systematically going about recreating those objects. At the first show Donnie George did see, he has done other shows, and this work has been in biennales also. Biennales.
Right.
And Michael is it's ongoing. I mean, he's doing panels from palaces that were destroyed by ISIS. I mean, enormous pieces. And they are all made from papier-mâché, from food packaging.
Precisely, yeah.
Wonderful food packaging from the Middle East. And Michael was very excited one day. He said, "Oh, I've got to show you this." He said, "I found a dialect that I had no idea was written on food packaging. He knew it was a different dialect." And he said, "I'm so excited to have this. It's going to go some special place." So he's brought a lot of Middle Eastern knowledge and lore, history,
And appreciation.
and appreciation. Oh my gosh, these things are beautiful.
For the art, for the food, for the culture at Broad. And again, I think it's in some ways a testament to your vision. And so I'm curious, actually, what is it that you're looking for? I think whether it's these long-term engagements with an artist and sort of a cultivation of an artistic practice, as with Michael, or I think with other artists that you might encounter through your travels or other ways. What's that thing that jumps out at you, that sort of piques your curiosity or interest and sort of leads to an ongoing conversation or engagement?
Well, most of our have been recommended to us, and they don't always take them, but referrals are very important. Talking to them, seeing their point of view. I mean, maybe how radical they are, maybe how radical they aren't. Just do they fit? Will they fit? And looking at their work, how it's done, is it good work? And what do they have to say? Trying to give an example.
Maybe
There are many.
maybe a story you haven't told, in some ways. Is there an artist that you didn't engage with?
Yeah.
Just came about unexpectedly because of, I think, these connections or recommendations, that changed the way that you worked as a dealer. I'm curious if there are artists that you
Sure. There was one artist I was thinking of.
regret or maybe wish you had worked with them. I'm curious, sort of in 30 years, what's the story that you might want to talk
I
about?
think this goes back to the 90s.
Mhm.
And we showed so many wonderful artists that nobody had ever heard of. And we showed Irvin Worm, and we loved his work. It was so absurd. It was just ridiculous. And I have one photograph. I realized it was hanging in my front hall because there was a nail there, and I just put it up. But it's a woman lying on the floor, sprawled with her suitcase on her back. And makes me laugh. We have another artist, though, who we are showing, who was recommended to us, Masinisa Selmani.
Beautiful work, yes.
And he's so absurd. He's just delightful. And
if you go into the images of the current show, I believe we might be able to see Masinisa.
is there a Masinisa?
Maybe the earlier one. I'm trying to remember
Uh,
my sort of visit of the gallery recently.
okay. Sweet.
In there. No, I think this is still Dan.
That's Dan. Oh, yeah.
Beautiful, subtle drawings and animations that I think speak to sort of an absurdity of life, but in a way that also feel very surreal and very sort of engaging, and for me also very familiar in some ways.
Well, yes, maybe. But sometimes how ridiculous we are.
Yeah.
We're just making maybe mountains out of molehills and whatever. I find his work just wonderful. And as, as a person, he's very, very nice to work with.
Yeah.
Which also is helpful if the artist is good to work with.
And I'm wondering if there are other artists or projects that in hindsight or even at the time you thought was too risky, but still put your full weight and sort of advocacy behind. And how did that shape, I think, being a dealer and supporter of artists, both I think through your giving and sort of your advocacy? What is maybe a project that was so risky that it really sort of went beyond what you might have even done? But
Well,
this took you a
Carlos, Carlos Garacoa was risky, very risky,
Can you say
because he was Cuban.
Mm.
And
of being Cuban, that's already sort of a risk, or was there something about the work itself?
oh, the work was obviously criticizing of the regime,
Mhm.
very heavily criticizing. Munir Fatmi
Mhm.
is very critical of the system. His first show, we said, no, we cannot give it that title. He said, no, that's the title.
What was the title?
Fuck architects.
Okay, those are some choice words.
Yeah, and we said, well, no, he said, you don't understand. We're always being told how to live, what to do. The newspapers, the press, the church, books, they're telling us how to live. No, live the way I want to live, whatever. So, okay, let's see. And he did the most beautiful pieces out of television cable, because that's a communication, that were fabulous and beautiful work and beautifully done. And the show was a great success.
So the risk paid off.
Risk paid off. Yeah. And he's very strong on this topic.
I think I asked this a little earlier, and I'd like to kind of return to it. I think again, I think in an art world and sort of an art market, especially in New York, that's defined by sort of success, and often that art looks a certain way. I think you've kind of always been swimming sort of somewhat against the current with practices and artists that may not always sort of be successful commercially, but I think are successful within a different sort of critical reception and a sort of framework. And I wonder if you might reflect a little bit on that tension between, I think, commercial viability and surviving in the New York City art market for 30 years, when we hear of so many galleries that are shutting all around the city. What might those pressures have looked like, and how do you stay true, I think, to your vision and commitments as a dealer, while also, I think, living within the realities of a New York City art market?
Well, I have a very, very good staff, and we talk things over. What do you think? Is it good? Let's give it a try. Okay, this artist has a lot to say. You do it, and you might do one or two shows. I can't think of an example. Usually, if I want to show an artist, we show them at least once, and you have to. Something else makes up for it. You balance. You're constantly balancing. So you have your way out there artist, and you have your steady at home artist.
And so in some ways, they also support one another. And so I
Is
wonder if you might also speak a little bit about sort of building a roster, building sort of a program as a gallery that I think that balance is not just sort of from a commercial and sort of market aspect of some better than potentially others, but also the kinds of ideas that they're bringing collectively, the kinds of ideas that you're trying to have with a program like that?
Well, you balance it.
Mm.
You sometimes get out of balance, but you balance it so that you have the very political things that you want to show, and you have some other work which say the general public would like to see, or collectors might like to see, and it might not be political at all, but it's good work.
It's good work, but I also know that the gallery has also led, I think, in terms of supporting artists who are doing great work in terms of sort of working with new technology. And so I think
Okay.
another way in which I think the gallery kind of stands out and working with artists who I think are at the forefront and sort of cutting edge.
Lu Yang.
Precisely.
Yeah, precisely. Whoa, uh, beautiful work though. Really, she is so bright. She is very bright. And she was recommended to us by a curator, and we took a chance. Long distance phone calls to Shanghai.
Mm.
And yeah, it was interesting. And put that show together. And it was beautiful. People didn't know what to make of it, but that eventually they liked it. And then it wasn't too long. Her work was shown at Midnight Moment in Times Square, and
No.
she was here. She came for it. And the expression on her face with all those images lighted up, it was really wonderful. I don't like Times Square, but that was special. Right.
There's so many other questions. I wonder, going back to, I think, 30 years of history, I'm curious if there are artists, projects, or initiatives that you've championed that you'd like to see continue beyond your direct involvement as a gallerist. And I think there's a way in which often a dealer or a gallerist might work with an artist earlier on in career, and then they kind of move on and are sort of, after being nurtured, sort of are picked up by other galleries or kind of move into a different sort of phase of their practice. And so if there are artists that you would like to see sort of their work continue or things that they're doing, I think beyond your direct involvement.
Well, Sawang, I would love to see go farther. He's not well known. At least he's not known in this country.
Mhm.
He is very well known in this country. He went on. This is Mark Bradford. Sawang, yeah, he deserves to be better known than he is.
And maybe,
Ming Wei is very well known.
yeah, if we can just go back to the Mark Bradford, because I'm realizing we maybe didn't even talk about it. We spoke about it earlier before we got underway. But can you say a bit about this project? Is ongoing ways, and we're
no, it isn't. Mark is too far up there now to be putting extensions in people's hair. He's wonderful. He's a really wonderful person, and he I did me. He hasn't done it yet, except a little, but he to advertise so that people would come in our container. And we had some of his paintings also, his early paintings, and a video. And so I walked around with red hair hanging down, and people, oh, what'd you do? So they take them to the container. Well, by the end of the show, we had men, women, children. Oh, there's another wonderful picture of a young girl holding her father's hand as he sat in the chair getting little blue extensions in his hair. And Mark was really great doing that. He's, of course, gone on to much bigger and better things.
And I joked when I first got the invitation that I was going to, because it's Halloween, that I was going to come dressed as
Oh,
Jane Lombard, but I couldn't pull it off in time.
oh yes, you could. Yeah. Um, just get some red dye.
Such an iconic look for you, and we were just joking earlier that in the winter you have to take off your hat, or otherwise people may not
No,
recognize.
no, I said I'm going to go home and get this stuff out of my hair. It was glued in, by the way. It was really awful. And I got on the plane, and so many people said, "Oh, hey, I like your hair. What'd you do? Well, maybe I ought to keep it." So I did,
And it's been with you ever since.
and I can't get rid of it.
I think before we turn it to the audience for questions, and again, I have lots of other questions. I think maybe a question that I am beginning to get now that I'm teaching, although I'm not nearly in a position to give advice. I'm curious for younger dealers who might want to emulate and follow in your footsteps, and really sort of, I think, merge politics, artist support. What advice would you give? What missteps would you warn them about?
Oh, well, be sure you know what you're doing, uh, that you have sufficient support to continue, that you're paying attention to what's going on in the world, to what people are looking for, thinking about, and try to feed into that. Uh, Maybe start slowly. Uh,
Build support networks, I believe.
I think support networks are extremely important. The curators, the writers, your fellow gallerists. And we're very happy to be in Tribeca now, sort of almost back to where we started. And there's good support down there. Very
There's
good.
of like-minded galleries.
Yes. Yeah.
Seeing more and more galleries
Oh,
sort of share resources, share artists, share ways.
people are now more and more. Yeah. Oh, Dan. I don't know what show that was. Squeak, you're on. I think you're listening to this call. Squeak lives out in the Bay Area. She's an older artist, not so well known in New York as she is out west. And she comments freely, whatever she wants. She's a wonderful artist. She taught for many years, and she will be our January show.
Well, looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be a good show. I am sure of that.
I also wonder if you might want to reflect a little bit on sort of a balance between the personal and public dimensions of being a dealer and a collector. What stays private? What do you share? What do you exhibit? What does that balance look like for you personally?
Well,
Because you're in your studio, we're seeing lots of art that you're surrounded by. And so maybe while we have a peek into your private quarters, and I think all of us can easily visit and should visit the gallery, I'm curious about that balance between what stays private and what stays public. How do things sort of maybe move from public at the gallery and then moving into your private life?
It's sort of all the same. I don't know, not much different. When I started to collect, I collected quite different things. So there's early work, and then there's this transition, and I think one of the last things, well, not really, that I bought was a piece by Richard Bell was an Aborigine.
Behind
Yeah. White Lies Matter.
Matter, who is a member of
Eh,
the collective Propa now
Yes.
of the Veriliss Center, or rather the Jane Lombard Project in social.
Well, that's not why I bought it. I just overwhelmed with that painting and the message. And I don't know how that would do in the gallery. Might be okay. But I enjoy it. Makes me think.
Sort of putting these
Yeah.
things private that might also sort of move and circulate.
I mean, yes. Yeah, I don't, well, as I say, sometimes I say, oh, we couldn't ever show this. I'll show it. But at home, it wouldn't, it'll never sell in the gallery. But it's not a huge difference.
And Joshua, we'll turn it over to you, but I think one last question for me.
Oh.
If you were doing this in 2025, what else might you be doing? What alternative would you have imagined for yourself?
I have no idea.
So you're doing what you've always wanted to do.
I'm very happy
Wonderful.
doing what I'm doing. And I say, I hope that everybody else in the gallery is happy too. Actually, today we are receiving the book that goes with the 30 by 30 show.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and so I'm going down now to see the book.
That's a special feeling.
Yes, we're excited about the book. Come by and get one.
Congratulations, team, to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, everybody's excited.
With that, Joshua, I'll turn it over to you and see if there's questions in the room.
Thank you so much, both of you, for that conversation. We're going to turn to our audience Q&A now. If you have a question for Jane, there's a link in the chat where you can submit your question. We have a few here. So our first question comes from Tabor, who writes, you spoke earlier about formative experiences with art. I wonder if you could speak also about formative experiences with politics and how you came to understand the political nature or potential of art.
Probably when I went to the Soviet Union the first time. And I went many times after that. You had to think about it because it was all over. And I think I later managed to do something I wanted to do that when everything changed. People I was working with, we were able to work with artists and art people and try to help them modernize and bring them up to speed because they didn't sort of have the same ideas, and they were way back. So that gets you into politics pretty quickly.
Thank you so much for that question, Tabor, and thank you for that answer, Jane. Our next a really quick note that if you have noted that you'd like to unmute to ask your question, we just ask that you have your video on so that I can find you in the audience. Our next question comes from Stacy, who asks, was there a defining moment in your gallery career where you knew you accomplished what you set out to do with your mission?
Nothing that jumps out at me, but there have been times that have been very rewarding.
Great. And our next question comes from Tara. And Tara asks, how has the current political agenda against education and the arts and the humanities in general altered the flow of money into the arts? And how has this current sentiment altered your ability to show art?
It hasn't altered our ability to show it so far, so good. If they didn't close us down for Dan Projovsky, we're okay. He is probably the most vocal artist. I don't know if people are not buying. I think people are angry, so they are more apt to buy. But I don't know. I worry a little bit about it now.
Thank you for that answer. Our next question comes from Mary in the audience. Is there any country you haven't traveled to yet that you dream of traveling to?
Where did I want to go? No, I've managed to get that in last year. There's no particular. I want to go up to northern Finland and see the Northern Lights. Not political.
And something that I'm curious about, Jane, is I know that you've had engagements and relationships with nonprofit art centers in addition to your career as a gallerist. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more to those particular engagements.
Well, they're a list I engaged with, which is a wonderful, important, valuable institution. And they brought Richard Bell over, and they speak to the ills of the world through art. It's great. And the art, well, as I say, I've been working with a nonprofit that has done arts programs based on Eastern Europe, well, the Middle East and Russia.
Thank you so much, Jane, for those responses, and thank you everyone for those questions. Thank you both, Eriola and Jane, again for such an amazing conversation. Thank you, Mana from Jane Lombard Gallery for their support in preparing for today's event. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art and Tiger Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rail's YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, production staff, and operations. You can support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're available, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Jare Das and Chenoa Baker on the event of Body Vessel Clay, Black Women, Ceramics, and Contemporary Art at Ford Foundation Gallery. And as is real tradition, you can now turn on your microphone and say hello and goodbye as you leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
so
you.
much,
That was
Jane and
great.
Ariola.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you for all
Jane.
that you
So
did.
much.
Thank you.
Ariola.
Hi,
That was
Azuka.
amazing.
Jane.
What an amazing
Wonderful
conversation.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Congratulations on 30 years, Jane
You're well
Lombard
loved out there.
Gallery.
Let's meet at the gallery.
Congratulations. Bye. Thanks.
Congratulations,
Buddy.
Oh,
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Josh. Take good care,
Right.
everyone.
Thank you.
Congratulations,
Bye.
Jane.
Oh,
See you
oh,
soon.
that way.
Bye.